Hi, this is Kay from Clever Someday, and today I want to show you an overview of a new technique I've developed for flat embossing on cardstock with a Cricut. Perhaps you remember how we used to hand emboss with brass stencils, a stylus, and a light table back before the Cuttlebug became the embossing tool of choice. Maybe this manual technique will make a comeback with the Bright Pad, but I'm going to show you how to carry the same idea over to the digital realm and let the Cricut do the work for you. The strategy is to first make a stencil and then put cardstock on top of the stencil and have the Cricut Explore or Maker emboss it with the scoring stylus. The complicated part is building the file, but we won't be going into that for this overview. Instead, we'll walk through the mechanics with the Design Space file I've prepared for tutorial purposes. That way you'll be able to see how this works in a more or less controlled environment. There are only a few supplies you'll need to give this a try. The first is a thick but printable and cuttable material to use as a stencil. I'm using Recollections brand 110 pound 300 GSM cardstock from Michaels for this demo, but not all printers can handle this stock. Basically, you want the thickest white material that you can both print in your printer and cut with your Cricut. Even the common 110 pound 200 GSM Georgia Pacific cardstock from Walmart will do for demonstrating the concept. There are lots of other options, but I just want to keep it simple for now. Next, you will need cardstock to emboss. My favorite is the Neenah 67 pound vellum Bristol. Another option is the Walmart cardstock we mentioned before, or whatever light to medium weight cardstock you have on hand. For this demo, you want to pre-cut this lighter stock to 4 by 5 1/4 inches. You need a Cricut scoring stylus and a Cricut pen. If you're using a Cricut Explore 1 like I am, you will also need a Cricut 1 pen adapter. Technically the pen is optional, but it's helpful and simplifies the process. The only other thing you'll need is some low-tack tape like blue painter's tape or washi tape. You don't need a light pad, by the way, that was just to help me show the concept. You'll need to open the file I've shared, and I'll put a link for it in the description of this video. Design Space has changed since I recorded this, so if you don't see an open button, click Customize instead. We aren't actually going to customize, but I want to show you how the file should look. I'm going to condense the layers panel and zoom out so you can see an uncluttered view. The stencil portion is on the left and the embossing portion is on the right. Verify that it looks like what you see here. 2 open rectangles and a solid fish on the left, a solid rectangle and a dashed fish on the right. Each is an attached set. Click Make It. The large preview in the center will show the stencil portion from the left-hand side of the design canvas with the 2 open rectangles and solid gray fish. On the small preview on the left, you will see Print, Draw, Cut. This is correct as we'll be printing the sensor marks, drawing on some guidelines, and then cutting out our stencil. Click Continue. Click Send to Printer. Next you will see the print setup screen. The preview will show only the sensor rectangle and a blurry gray fish. We are going to be printing on heavy cardstock, so choose the feed path and printer settings appropriate for thick media. Details will depend on the printer and operating system you're using, but you may need to click on Advanced Options for this. Load your heavy cardstock into the printer and click Print. When it's finished printing, remove the printout. Place it on the mat aligned at the upper left corner as you normally would for print and cut. Select your Cricut machine from the pull down at the top. Set the dial to an appropriate setting for your media. I'm using the Poster Board Plus setting for my 300 GSM cardstock. If you're using a Maker, select your media in the software. There is not a Poster Board Plus setting, so maybe try Poster Board instead. Follow the on-screen prompts to load the tools and the mat. I'm using the Explorer 1, which has just a single tool head, so I am only prompted to load the pen for now. For other machines, you will load both the pen and the blade as prompted. Press the Load Mat button. Click the Cricut button on the machine. The Cricut will scan for the sensor marks, then it will draw the two rectangles with the pen. Because I'm using the Explore 1, it will pause for me to install the blade and then cut out the fish. On other Cricut machines, it will continue without pausing since the blade is already loaded. When it is finished cutting, press the arrow button to unload the mat. Remove the stencil from the mat, making sure all the pieces have cut completely and are removed. Be sure to thoroughly clean all the leftover pieces from the mat too. At this point, the stencil is complete, and the good news is that this part only needs to be done once because as long as you keep the file, the stencil can be reused. Place the completed stencil back on the mat in the normal position aligned at the upper left. Using the inner rectangle drawn on your stencil, position your 4 by 5 1/4 inch piece of cardstock on top of the stencil. To repeat, I'm using 67-pound Nina that I cut with a paper trimmer. You could certainly cut them with your Cricut if you want. Carefully secure it with tape along the leading edge and the sides, but leave it untaped at the bottom. Make sure the tape does not extend outside the larger drawn rectangle. The area between this rectangle and the sensor mark needs to be kept clear so as not to confuse the sensor. You also don't want the tape extending inward far enough that it's over the cutout area of the stencil, nor do you want any tape flapping up. When you go back to the screen, you'll see that mat 1 has a check mark in the upper left corner because it's complete, and that the second mat is now highlighted. Next to the small preview for mat 2, it says Print, Score, Cut. The truth is we only want it to score, but we need it to use the sensor marks to position the scoring, so we'll have to use a couple of simple tricks to work around this. The first trick is to click I've already printed and use the stencil we have instead of a new print. I'm setting my dial to poster board, but if you are using a maker, I would recommend the heavy watercolor paper setting instead for the scoring run. The next trick, and this is very important if you want your stencil to be reusable, is to remove the blade. This is simple on the Explore 1 because I am prompted to install the scoring stylus, which means I have to remove the blade. But for other machines, you will need to remove the pen, load the scoring tool, and remove the blade housing from the other side, ignoring the prompt to load the blade. Load the mat that has the stencil with the card panel taped to it, double check that there is no blade installed, and press the Go button on your Cricut. The Cricut will scan for the sensor marks, then score over the fish design twice, and that's because of how the file is put together. The Cricut will not normally double score regardless of the setting. Once it starts the scoring, make sure you keep an eye on it. It's really fun to watch. On the Cricut 1, it will prompt me to install the blade when it is finished scoring, and I have a convenient opportunity to unload the mat and finish at this point. On other Cricuts, it will proceed to air cutting the outer rectangle because there's no blade installed. When it's done, unload the mat and carefully remove the tape. Flip the panel over to reveal the embossed side. You will notice that the raised side is a mirror image of our original. Technically, the machine is debossing, not embossing, but this is something that is easily accounted for during the design process. You can reload the stencil to emboss more panels now or in the future. Use the same file and either hide the attached set on the left or just skip the first mat. It's a good idea to write the file name on the stencil itself, so you always have the right file when you come back to it in the future. I plan to be teaching you how to create your own embossing files in third-party software soon. Unfortunately, Design Space doesn't have the tools to do this alone. Thanks for bearing with me through this proof of concept demo. Understanding the process should make it easier to design files or even to decide if your project merits this much effort. If you've enjoyed seeing something new that your Cricut can do, be sure to follow my channel and my Clever Sunday blog so you'll know when follow-on tutorials are released. Thanks so much for watching.